Love the music. Love the music. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are right now. My name is Tom Caulfield, General Manager for Ackuretta of the Americas. We have Jasmine behind the scenes making everything look and sound great. She's in Taiwan, so it's already Friday for her, so she's ready to start her weekend. I'm here on the East Coast, so it's just 1 o'clock. Dr. Chonway Tram is on the West Coast, so it's a little still morning for him. But no matter where you are, we're glad you're here with us. And welcome everybody to the intro to dental 3D printing with Dr. Chonway Tram. Again, my name is Tom Caulfield, GM for the Americas here at Ackuretta. And we've got a great webinar here in store for you. And Dr. Chonway is going to take us through how he uses, what he does for 3D printing in his private practice. But before we get into that, we do want to share with you where we are and what's coming up, right? We're not going to let you forget us, that's for sure. February 16th, from scan to 3D print, in-house surgical guide printing. You don't want to miss this one. All of the, everything we're going to speak about regarding where we're going to be next and how to get in touch with us at Ackuretta is going to appear in the chat. So keep looking at the chat and you'll see links and registration forms. We've got one of the biggest dental shows in the United States coming up here at the end of this month. Ackuretta will be at Chicago Midwinter from the 23rd to the 25th. We'll have our own booth, and we're booth at 1638. We'll also be in several vendor partner, channel partner booths as well. And then, of course, just uptown a little bit north of Chicago Midwinter, we'll be at the largest lab. If you can just go back one slide, Jasmine. We'll be at the largest lab show, also at Lab Day, up at the Hyatt Regency, and we'll have a booth there as well, February 24th to 25th in the West Exhibit Hall, and we'll be at booth Q9. On to the next slide, please. And then February 24th at Lab Day, we have a couple different lectures going on at Lab Day, and one of them here is February 24th, 11 to 12 for analog removable prosthetic workflow. And then our last lecture is on the next slide, and that is with 𝗜𝗏𝘁𝗿𝐿. Some of you were on a webinar just a couple weeks ago that we had, and now you're going to see Lee live. Get to say hello to him. And of course, right, that question that we all pose is milling obsolete. And Lee's going to show us what he does at Sculpture Studios and how he uses 3D printing, specifically the Soul printer. Again, all of these upcoming webinars and upcoming shows that where we'll be at will be in the chat, so you'll be able to see all those different links, so you'll be able to take advantage and register right away. But today, right, we have the honor, the privilege, Dr. Chonway Tram. Here, we're going to spend about the next 50 minutes with him, and hang on all the way through this presentation, because we're going to have a little surprise for you at the end of the webinar. And then what I'd like to do is just introduce Dr. Tram. He's a private practice dentist, specializing in implants and 3D printing and CAD/CAM dentistry, a former graduate of Loma Linda University. And then he found his way all the way from the West Coast, transitioning over to the East Coast and doing his GPR at St. Barnabas Hospital in the Bronx, and also a former assistant professor at Western University. A great group of people out there if you've had a chance to see Western University in action. But this webinar, Dr. Tram is going to focus on giving an overview of how 3D printing and restorative dentistry can create a win-win for you, your office team, and then, of course, most specifically and most important, your patients. So with that said, we're going to move it over here to Dr. Chonway Tram, and he's going to take us through the next 50 minutes. Stay tuned at the end for your special surprise, and then any Q&A, we'll take it here live for you. Dr. Tram, looking forward to hearing from you.
All right, guys. Well, welcome to the webinar. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you are. Welcome to this lecture. Now, for the most part, we're not going to spend too much time on the science of the 3D printing. The idea is to kind of give you a general idea of where we're heading, where we're going, and what we expect in terms of 3D printed restorations and prostheses. This lecture specifically is going to be about 3D printed restorations. Once again, I'm Dr. Chonway Tram. Welcome. All right, next slide. Now, why do we 3D print restorations? In a basic nutshell, the idea is to have something that is super accurate, something that bonds really well, that mimics your natural teeth. And that really, this is where 3D printing comes in. And when we talk about milled versus milled restorations, direct restorations, and 3D restorations, 3D printed restorations have basically the best qualities of both milled and direct restorations. Now, when you look at this picture right here, these are just peg laterals. It's a very common thing that we see in our patients. This was a printed restoration using the Ackuretta sole and 𝗣𝗿𝗶𝘁𝗹. Now, what I really want to highlight with just this picture, right? This is to me the super coolest part, is that even during the try-in phase, right, there's minimal tooth preparation. And when you try in a restoration like this, intraoral scanning, designing, when you try it in, you see the fit is so accurate that it stays in place. And, you don't get that too much from milled restorations, where, again, that retention is just right there. So bonding becomes a super easy process. This was stained using optical glaze and then final cure. But I mean, the results kind of speak for themselves, and that's the cool thing about 3D printed restorations. A case like this, to maybe an hour and a half after staining, and this is something the patient was super ecstatic about, where there was super conservative in nature, but yet gives them this great kind of fuller smile. All right, next slide. Now, this kind of goes over just a couple basics of what I said. Why 3D printed? Obviously the aesthetics are super important. Fluorescence kind of plays in with the aesthetics. Basically, great color retention. low plaque. I mean, these are all basic things we look for in restorations, in direct restorations. Basically, something that is nice, smooth, biocompatible, and basically friendly to the opposing dentition. Next slide. Now, when we compare 3D printed restorations with, let's just say, traditional direct composites, right? Here you can see on the left side, it's basically our different ways of kind of layering composites. Basically, we drop a layer, we prep the tooth, we drop a layer of composite into the box, we cure that, and then we add on additive layers until we get the restoration to where we want it to be. On the right, it kind of shows this general image of how these 3D printed restorations are formed. Essentially, you start off with a liquid resin vat, which is a little tank of liquid resin that is cured underneath using a high-powered UV light. And basically, it's cured layer by layer. So you have a uniform cure of the restoration as it's being built. And basically, there's nothing left to chance. You get this nice, consistent, and accurate restoration from that. All right, next slide. Now, when you compare 3D printed restorations to, let's just say, milled restorations. Now, this image basically shows, again, its speed right now is about very similar to milled, so I'm not going to say that is too much of an advantage at this point. 3D printers are getting faster in terms of how these restorations are processed, but the accuracy is probably the biggest thing. With the mill, you have basically this subtractive model of creating a restoration. You start off with a block, a brick, and then you take a drill that basically cuts into it. And when you do that, you're basically getting a restoration that isn't completely form-fitting to what you have. Hence the loss of retention or basically some areas where it's over milled. Now, 3D printing, because it's additive, the great part about it is you have this uniform restoration that's going to be to the exact specifications that you designed it for. All right, next. Now, this is just an image that I want to show you. These are restorations that were done on you can see number 19, 29, and 30. These are delivered, basically packed in, wrote in sculpture restorations. Now, what I want you to look at here is that it's more about when you look at the bite, when you look at the x-ray, you look at that restoration and you see that dense, complete fill. And that to me is super cool to see. You have this nice bonded restoration that fits well. The margins are super clear and intact. And it's so form-fitting that it just looks like just a nice, solid restoration. Next slide. Now, when we talk about the Ackuretta sole, there's two main resins that I like to use for permanent restorations. One is the 𝗲𝗁 Crown Plus from 𝗣𝗿𝗶, and the other is the Rodin Sculpture. For veneers, actually for basically any restorations, inlays, onlays, veneers, any of these resins will do. That'll work well. But the Rodin Sculpture does have a higher ceramic filler content, which in the US is actually, you can actually bill that for insurances as a ceramic restoration, I think starting this year in 2023. So these are the two main go-to restorative resins that I like to use. All right, next slide. Now, the workflow is pretty basic in terms of how you go from the first time you seat your patient to a finished restoration. The idea is, one, prep the tooth, get a good scan, design it, print it, process it, then polish it. Okay, it's a very kind of simplified workflow here. All right, next step. Now, when you scan, I'm going to go over just a couple small basics. Intraoral scanning has evolved so much so, and it's such an open market right now that to me, honestly, any intraoral scan that can produce an STL will work when it comes to creating starting to create these restorations. Now, in terms of general design software, PlanCAD, 3Shape, Planix, ExoCAD, even 𝗲𝗁𝘁𝗿𝗄, They all have design softwares that you can use. And to me, as long as you can design it, you can print it, okay? And basically for when we talk about how should I prep a tooth for restorative, I'm going to tell you, don't change too much from what you've already been doing. Generally speaking, for more conservative restorations, again, inlays, onlays, veneers, follow very similar CAD/CAM recommendations, which means for your milled materials. Follow those guidelines, generally speaking, and you should be okay. Smooth walls, basically mild taper. You want to be able to see it, and if it's super gingival, it definitely makes it a lot easier. All right, next slide. Now, basic restorative. So this case, this is a basic onlay that that I prepped for a tooth here. This is designed using exocad. Again, you can use any software that you want. To me, exocad is, I have a Medit scanner. So Medit has a connection to the exocad program. So for me to design, this is mildly sped up a little bit, but to design a restoration like this, it shouldn't take longer than 2-3 minutes. This restoration actually here, it took me about 2 minutes to do. So the idea is simple. Mark your margins, right? Get a basic outline of the tooth shape, which is what you see right here. Get a general basic tooth shape into the area that fits the area. And then once you go through the program AI is going to fabricate something very similar to what you want. Some mild occlusal adjustments here just to make sure that it fits pretty well. But for the most part, I mean, that's it. I tend to, for these restorations, I tend to make the occlusion just a little bit thicker, just to have a nice kind of dense fill, and then adjust it and try it in the mouth if we need to. Okay, but the idea is that with these softwares now, you can design single tooth. 3Shape has an automated design software program that can spit out a restoration really, really quick. So the technology has gone to the point where a lot of these simple designs, for the most part, are pretty much straightforward. Okay, next slide. Now, once you have the designed restoration, the Alpha AI program is a program that's unique to the Ackuretta Soul and Dentique and the Ackuretta line of printers. The great thing about this software here is that you have an AI nesting system that basically designs the supports for you. Here, we just put in the basic parameters of what we're trying to do. We're using the Pactant rodent sculpture resin material here. The STL of the file is basically drag and dropped into the program. And then when you, on the top right side, you just click a button and all of a sudden your supports are all there. And basically you slice it and you go. The simplicity of this program is very, very unique and super easy to use. The only other thing I added here was I changed the support size to be a little bit smaller so that it's easier to break off. But again, once you click the slice button, okay, it'll give you a time frame for how long. In this case, this restoration takes 22 minutes. You save it slice, and then you just send it over to the printer and have the printer kind of print from there. And that is basically the entire, that's how simple it is when you have a support program that is very easily in tune. Now, after you slice it, just print it, okay? And when the print's done, you should have a restoration that looks something like this, where the restoration, it has a little bit of uncured resin surrounding it and whatnot. And you'll see the supports on there, okay? Once you take it out of the printer, I like to use a razor scraper. You can kind of see the base of the restoration is nice and flat. So you take like a very sharp blade, like a razor scraper, to kind of work your way underneath it. And that way it pops the restoration right out. Next slide. Now, post-processing, there are all sorts of 3D printers with all sorts of wash units and this and that. A lot of the newer materials or the resin materials for restorative dentistry, you don't want to submerge these restorations in alcohol. The basic solution to that is basically you're going to blow off the excess resin on this restoration, and you're just going to spray it with alcohol. And what you want to do is you're just cleaning off the excess resin on these restorations here. For the most part, in the next video here, I'm going to show you that process here. But the idea for so this is basically support removal and cleaning. So you have a restoration with the supports in place. The supports are small enough to where you can easily break it off. So you can see in the video, we start off with this restoration. We have the printed supports in there, and really you just take it and with your finger and just kind of break it off a little bit here. So now you have this restoration that's very in the form that you want, but you can kind of see it's got that glazed color to it, okay? And that glazed color is basically uncured resin. And this is where you want to clean that off. And to clean it off, you really just takes a couple sprays of alcohol, a little bit of compressed air, and basically rinse and repeat. Do that until you get this nice dry appearance. Now, if you soak the restoration in like an alcohol bath for too long, you're going to get this chalky color, and that chalky color basically it basically takes away some of the strength away from that. So you don't want to submerge these restorations in alcohol and get that chalky white colored look. But for the most part, you want this kind of you just want it dry looking. As long as it looks dry, then you can cure it. All right, next step. Now, so after you rinse with the alcohol and you dry, you're going to put it in your appropriate curing unit. There are different curing units that have different times set up for the materials, depending on the material itself. So I have the Ackuretta 𝗗𝗲 and the Auto Flash. Both of them have different material setting times or curing times. So just make sure you follow the manufacturer specifications for the restoration that you're using, the material that you're using, and that's specific to the curing unit that you actually have. When we talk about polishing, once it's done curing, it's simple to use something. This is like a Comet 9845, which is like a Scotch-Brite burr, to remove the support. So you're running like a slow speed at about 2,000 to 4,000 RPM, and you're kind of brushing over where the supports are. And it really kind of makes a nice and smooth surface. And also finish it off with a 9489 Comet burr. And that kind of, again, smooths things out a little bit better. Next slide. Now, after polishing, okay, when we look at, let's just say this picture right here, this is basically an image of a restoration that has all the supports removed. And then basically we gave it a nice little shine and color. In this case, I used Optical. Optical is a great staining kit available from GC that you can add some residual effects, some 3D effects mimicking natural tooth color. Now, the Optiglaze in itself, the stain does not last as long. If you just kind of take the restoration, put it on the stain, it'll look pretty, but the stain does wear off over time. So what we like to do, for if you want to do it, if you want that long-lasting shine and retain the colors, we do what's called candy coating. Candy coating is after the glaze is cured, is to add a very, very thin layer of the resin that you're using to create the restoration. In this case, it's packed in the rodent sculpture. It is just take a little bit of rodent sculpture on a thin brush and just kind of brush it over the restoration, put it in some glycerin, and then cure it again. And that basically creates, what we call a candy-coated layer that kind of protects the integrity and the color from wearing away and actually keeps the aesthetics there. All right. Slide. So this is just a kind of a basic walkthrough. Okay, so we have a tooth that obviously failing composite. Like I said, prep wise, this is prep for an onlay, crown lay, call it whatever you may be. But the idea is a nice clean prep with super gingival margins, nice clear margins, and smooth corners. And basically, this is a great case for a resin type of restoration. Next step. Now, once you kind of prep it, okay, obviously scan it with your version of your intraoral scanner and then take it to the appropriate design program. In this case, this was PlanCAD. from Mecca, but just design the restoration according to the parameters. And basically, this is a try-in. You don't have to try it in with supports. I think we do it just for pictures to show you the fit, but you don't have to do it that way. Okay, if you wanted to, technically you can basically glue it in, cement or bond the restoration in with the supports, break off the supports, and polish it. I like to add effects to it. I like to glaze it. I like to make sure it's got this nice kind of shiny and basically tooth color to it. So I don't like to do that as much, but technically you can. But more when you see pictures with supports in, it's just more to show you the retentive factors, basically the restorations, the margins of it, and how cool the restoration is. All right, next step. Now, when you're getting ready to deliver this type of restoration, okay, the idea is you want to pre-treat the restoration before bonding it intraorally. The way you do that is after you're polishing, after you add the glaze, everything, the restoration is all ready to go, you'd want to air abrade it. Okay, air abrade it and treat it with a primer. Okay, the primer that we like to use, for me personally, any primer with MDP. Okay, MDP primers such as Clear Fill Ceramic Primer, Z Prime from Bisco, all those help enhance the bond of the restoration. So we definitely, and sandblasting also helps as well. Now, next slide. So again, when you deliver this restoration, treat it as you would any type of, again, resin restoration. In terms of tooth prep, it's the same thing, which is, do your selective etching, prime bond, and then use the appropriate resin cement that you use. And, for the most part, I'm not too picky about it. I think mostly any resin cement will do well for these types of restorations. All right, next slide. Now, why do we air abrade an MDP? This is just a general overview of why. The idea is that, when you look at a chart like this, the bond's better. That's really it. That's really why we do it. Can you get away with it with just basically applying the primer and adhesive? Yes, you can. Can you do just sandblasting without doing the MDP primer? Sure, why not? But the idea is that you will get a better bond strength, shear strength if you do those procedures, which is why I recommend doing it. Sandblast the intaglio of the restoration, add that MDP primer, and then prep your tooth as you would for a direct or indirect restoration, and then just pop it in place. All right, next. Now, why do we do these restorations? Okay, right now, when we consider that traditional milling and 3D printed, right now I can tell you that the processing time is about the same in terms of, if you mill a crown and basically put it in the oven and whatnot. The time frame to do that is very similar to the same time frame as doing one restoration with 3D printing. The great thing about 3D printing is that you can print multiple restorations at the same time. So instead of doing things one by one, you can basically perform quadrant dentistry better and faster and more accurate. When you compare basically 3D printing to, let's just say, direct composites, right? When you have a large MOD or a large restoration in general, you're using a lot of composites in there, okay? So the idea is that when you print these out, these restorations should, when you buy a bottle of resin, your basic cost is about maybe $1 to $2 per restoration, whereas a typical MOD restoration, I mean, you're using a lot of composite to flow in there, line in there. So you're actually saving money doing 3D printing. And when you're saving money, it's the same thing along the lines of as milled. Milled restorations, you're paying cost per block. Okay, 3D printing, again, you can print out a whole lot of these things, and you'll still be a lot cheaper than milling out one unit of any type of restoration. Okay. All right. Now, that brings me to my next point right now, which is that's it. Today was more just as a general overview. I want to kind of show you what's possible. Okay. Time frame wise. Now, when we talk about time frames, how is it? when you look at a case like this where we do one onlay, how long does that actually take me from start to finish? Okay. Ideally, from the time the patient's seated, anesthetized, prepped, okay, that should take maybe about 15, 20 minutes to design, maybe another 5, design, scan and design another 5 minutes, okay? To print, post-process, we're talking about another 30, 35 minutes, okay, in total. So the idea is that you have one restoration, you can print it out and have the patient from start to deliver in about an hour, I'd say hour and a half, okay? And here's the thing, you do that quadrant dentistry, or you up that one onlay to 2 onlays, or 2 onlays, or 1 MOD. The idea is that the easiest part about this is the cementation or the bonding, because the restoration fits so well, you don't have to worry about it actually moving. So that takes away, to me, the cementation or the bonding is actually the quickest part of the procedures. When we talk about these veneers, we talk about these restorations, okay, the accuracy is so great that the cleanup for these restorations are very minimal, comparatively speaking, to what we're used to doing. And the fit's going to be a lot better. And I mean, the suckiest thing I do in my practice is a large MOD or composites in general. Sitting there, layering, curing, layering, making sure the contact's still there. I mean, it's the most time-consuming and annoying thing to do. But when you have a 3D printed restoration that fits well, that okay, I'm just going to pop that sucker in there, and it just fits. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And so to me, that's where you're saving time. You're not worried about, is this going to fit or not? Because it will. And that's the coolest thing. And that's what makes this technology so awesome. And where we're going with this is you have these great fitting restorations that seat well, they bond well, and for the most part, they wear well. Okay, the color, the aesthetics, and the function is what you want to expect. This is what we wanted from a direct resin. This is what we expected these restorations to be. And you're getting all the best qualities of that. And in the future, it's only going to get better. The resins are going to print faster. There will be better, stronger resins. But for the most part, what we have now, it's super amazing. And it's just a matter of now taking what we have and implementing it from our basically our current systems. And for the most part, it's not too much of a change from what we did with traditional CAD/CAM and milling. The only difference is that you're still scanning the same, you're still designing the same, but now instead of sending it to the mill, now you're just printing it. And a lot of times when you print it, from the time of printing to the delivery, these are all delegatable tasks that you can have your assistant do. So it doesn't take up too much of your time to actually do that. All right. So that is the extent of my lecture today. We're going to open it up for some questions, or if you guys have anything, let me know, and we'll go from there. All right, Jasmine. Tom?
Dr. Tram, that was awesome. Yeah. Boy, just like printing, right? The webinars are shorter, right? It's not as lengthy as milling webinars. Not to say that milling is going away. We all know there's a place for it, but boy, 3D printing, how quick and efficient, and that's how we run the webinars as well. I would encourage everybody to put some questions into the question box. There is a little tab for questions. We appreciate if it's not in the chat box because we don't want to lose your question. But right now I'm going to go into chat to see if any questions were put in there. But if you have something, right, if you're thinking of it, I can assure you somebody else on this webinar is thinking the same thing. Please put a brief question into the question box and we'll elaborate on it. So let me just pop in the chat real quick. And Dr. Tram, do you have access to the chat as well?
Yeah. Okay,
so one question, and this is, I know this gets a little tricky because we're talking about different resin manufacturers, although I know you did mention rodent sculpture. And how much is the strength and fracture resistance of this restoration over a direct composite?
No, it's honestly, if you want, you can hit me up afterwards and I'll give you some studies on it. The idea that the strength and fractures is a lot more in the nicest possible way. It's a lot more, a lot less milled, obviously, because of the resin properties of it. But the idea is that when you have a restoration that is more completely filled, when you have a restoration that is cured more uniformly, the difference between let's say a direct restoration versus a 3D printed one is, again, it really comes down to the degree of cure. When you cure when you cure an intraoral restoration, right, you're actually getting about maybe 60% of true photopolymerization, which is, it doesn't really cure all the way through. So the strength is decreased because you're not getting that 100% cure. Whereas with 3D printing, you're getting that cure that is nice and even and consistent all the way throughout the restoration. So that kind of adds to the strength of the restoration itself. But yeah, I'm going to give you my email when we're done here. And yeah, just kind of hit me up if you want the studies on that. We can show you the studies on those, on the strength comparisons.
Great. And then Jasmine, if you wouldn't mind putting it into the chat, Dr. Tram's email, so he could take any questions like that might be in depth. Here's a good question, and I know we get a lot of questions regarding, hey, how long does it take? And I know speed is always, a concern to everybody. Of course, quality and microns and, measurement, we're always worried about that as well, and it's always that balance. I don't know if we really went into it in detail here, and I know you mentioned the Soul printer. One of the benefits out of the Soul printer is the ability to interchange different size build plates. I used to be able to say, hey, we're the only printer in North America that has that. Now I see somebody else is coming out with that at 4 times the price of our current build plates, but that's okay. We have different size build plates. So there's a question on here is about a surgical guide. And just so everybody is aware, right, we have our large build plate, medium build plate, and small build plate. And depending on what you're printing, the smaller build plate that you can put it on, you actually save time and technically waste less resin because there's less resin that accumulates on the build plate. But so Dr. Tram, I'm curious to hear, which build plate you're using. So how long does it take for you to print and finish a surgical guide?
Surgical guide, with the Ackuretta Soul, again, as Tom said, there's 3 build plates, which is basically the surface area of the printing surface. Basically a small, medium, and regular. The smallest build plates are designed for restorations, so they're really small. The build plate itself is very small, so it can fit maybe about 5 to 6 restorations tops. The medium build plate, you can fit an arch, which is traditionally what the medium build plate is what I use for surgical guides and even hybrid printing. For the most part, surgical guide printing should take about 30 minutes or less. Processing for that should be another. Again, here's the thing. Me personally, I like to hand wash. I don't, when it comes to speed and you want to speed up your time, hand washing to me is the quickest way, which is basically you take this thing, right, remove the supports, squirt it with some alcohol, dry it, do it again, and that process is going to take under a minute for you to wash this thing. With surgical guide, hybrid, resins, onlays, and any type of restoration. The only time I'd like to use a wash is with models. But for the most part, any type of intraoral device I'm putting in there, it's just faster. I just take it, wash it by hand with alcohol, dry it out, and cure it. So time frame wise, it can become about 30-minute print.
Right. So about a 35-minute print, a couple of minutes of a hand wash with a spray bottle, and then 5 to 10 minutes in the curing.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So all in 45 minutes to print a finished surgical guide, you'd say, yeah. Correct? Okay, good. So I heard you mention a couple different softwares out there. I heard 3Shape, I heard ExoCAD, I heard Medit Link, and I heard Romexis. You really covered them all because there's a question here and it says, hey, what design software do you recommend? And I know that's a little, sometimes a little bit of a challenge. I do know we always recommend that. What do you have in your practice right now, right? Are you a Plan Mecca customer? Well, maybe you want to get into Plan CAD Premium that I heard you mention. If you're a Medit scanner, right? Maybe you want to get it. Maybe you want to grab Medit Link for their software. If you're a 3Shape customer, possibly 3Shape if you have the budget for it. But what would you recommend, Dr. Tram, for somebody just getting into 3D printing and wanting to design in office?
When when we talk about CAD/CAM designs, right? Because there's so many different types of softwares out there, they all do different things, and really you're looking for what kind of. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for just simple restorations, there are a lot of doctors right now using 𝗲𝗍𝗿. 𝗲𝗍𝗿 has their AI program, which, you know, when we talk about simplicity, that is the easiest way to go in terms of you prep it, the AI marks the margins and creates the restorations. You just take it and you print it. So there's that. You know, I'm not sure on the cost on that, but 𝗲𝗍𝗿 has their AI program. I'm sure other companies will too. In my office, I have a 𝗗𝗏𝗏 intraoral scanner, so I like exocad. Exocad, because of the variety and all these things that we can do with exocad. Obviously, if you have the CEREC, you're going to go with the CEREC workflow. If you have PlanMeca, you go with PlanCAD and their workflow. So to me, it's when we get started, it really comes down to first question is what kind of scanner do you have? If you have in a way an open scanner like 𝗏𝗏𝗏 or Shining or one of those, then you want a design program that can accommodate that. And Clinics is another one that just came out that's browser based, that doesn't require you know, the huge jump like exocad does. I've heard good things about Clinics. So for the most part, when we talk about ease of use, what is your ecosystem? You know, obviously CEREC, you can design in CEREC, like I said. PlanMeca, you can design in PlanCAD. But if you're using a third party, like an open source intraoral software, then either to me it's going to be exocad, 𝗲𝗍𝗿, or even again Blue Sky Plan or Clinics. Clinics is the easiest to install just because it's browser based.
Right. Okay. Good. Good. So a question here about what do you use for coating the inlays? I guess it would be what do you finish with?
For coating inlays, I mean, the idea is still the same as for an inlay onlay. Typically inlays, I don't stain inlays because one, it's an inlay. Trying to stain something that small is just, you can't. Don't get me wrong, you can do it, but I don't stain anything with inlays. For me, it's simplicity and surface area. You have great properties in it with just a fine polish. Once you remove the supports and polish, it really kind of brings out a nice shine to it already. So all the great properties of 3D printing already innately built in. So you don't have to coat, to me, you don't have to coat inlays with anything.
Okay. And then the question here, and then this is really an insurance question, and that is, you know, so 3D printed restoration is stronger than a traditional composite, but they're not as strong as a milled. How do you charge for 3D printed restoration? You know, same price as milled, question mark, question mark. I know you mentioned earlier regarding the ADA code change in the very beginning.
I mean, that is, we can spend a whole lecture on just that alone. Because when we talk about strength, right, we're talking about flexural strength. Obviously, yes, you have these milled restorations that are a lot stronger, such as EMAX, or like a lithium disilicate and whatnot. It's not as strong. That is true. The flexural strength is not as strong as these types of restorations. But where you're making up that strength is that flexural strength doesn't really count for much intraorally. You know, the idea is that when you have a nice solidly formed and filled restoration that's bonded well, the idea is that because it's able to mimic and flex like a tooth should, the idea is that it actually will be as strong as, to me, almost comparable to a mill type of restoration because of the innate functions that's built into the resin itself. And that's what makes it great. Now, there are certain resins out there that you can build this traditionally as a inlay, onlay, and whatnot. Okay, that's due to the recent changes in the CDT coding, that you can start building these, again, onlays as these inlays, onlays, crowns, if you want to, as ceramic restorations. If not, personally, I do in my office. If I can't build it as such, then they are, to me, resin restorations that are basically in between a direct composite and whatever my fee would be for a porcelain restoration. I kind of build in the middle of that charge.
And then with that, right, it's really based on the resin if you can bill for that. And I know you mentioned packed-end sculpture resin, and that's what you use for your permanent tooth restoration.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So I use a packed-end rodent sculpture as a permanent restoration. Before that, I used the 𝗣𝗿𝗶𝘁𝗹 crown. It has very similar properties, but not enough ceramic filler content, so that you can't build to insurance. But the qualities are, to me, I can't say similar, but it works. I've used it for inlays along the 𝗣𝗿𝗶 for inlays on lays. I use the 𝗣𝗿 for implant restorations, and they've been functioning well so far. Given the time frame that I've used the 𝗣𝗿, we're talking about 1.5 to 2 years. So so far the restorations have held up pretty fine with the 𝗣𝗿. But again, I've kind of switched over to the packed-end rodent right now.
Yeah, it looks as though packed-end rodent was really one of the first ones to break into this market, and now, of course, other resin manufacturers will be chasing to get to that 51% nano ceramic fill. So you can print now, not just a temporary, but actually bill it out as a permanent restoration. Okay, let me see if we got a couple more questions in here. We shared your email, so get ready. Here's a question. I don't know if this E1 references a 3-shade lab scanner, but what is the main difference between, you must know this, between this and the E1 or another that is aimed towards doctors? I don't know what E1 is.
Okay, the E1. Now, I'm assuming the E1 is, what a great question. E1 is a 3D printer from EnvisionTech.
Okay.
Now, this printer, to me, is geared towards dentists. Can you use it in a lab? 100% you can. The idea that this printer is game-changing is such a horrible word. Not game-changing, but the idea that you have a unit that is affordably priced, that can allow dentists to go into 3D printing. I think this is where the Ackuretta soul shines, is that it is a printer that is more affordable, has a lot of validated resins to it, and basically when you open the box, it'll work. That's it. The support is also there, so you're getting all, to me, the great qualities of what you should expect from a 3D printer, which is great support, and you want this sucker to function right out of the box. And that's what the Ackuretta Soul is great at, is that once you take it out, the instructions are pretty straightforward, that once you able to take your resin, and here's the thing with any 3D printer, is that making sure that your resin is ready. Is it properly heated? Is the resin, does it need to be manipulated? Does it need to be rolled, shaped? Like, you have to follow the manufacturer specifications for the resin. If we don't read that, then this is where a lot of times failures occur, is that you have to follow the instructions for the resin. But once you do that and you pour that resin into the machine, it should print right away. And that, to me, is a great thing about the Ackuretta, is you have this model for dentistry, that this breakthrough model that you can, basically any dentist can look at and say, I can afford this, I can do this, I can break into 3D printing, whether it be just veneers, restorations, dentures, models, partials, Maryland bridges. You can do all these things, but it's not, but you have the support of a company that is, again, that's going to be with you and kind of walk you through the process. I think Ackuretta really shines in that regard.
Okay, well said. Yeah, some of your peers have nicknamed it small but mighty, a footprint of 12 inches by 12 inches, as compared to other, printers on the market that, when you look at them and then you realize you have to add the wash and a curing unit, it's not going chair side. It's going into a room, maybe, right, sterilization room or some type of area in the office where you can't even fit it in an operatory. So small but mighty is some of what your peers have nicknamed it. And then, of course, the value of the price, sub $9,000, all sold through channel distribution. Yeah, I think it stands on its own. There's very little competition where we are right now as compared to the other printers on the market. Okay, I think we're about running out of questions. If anybody has a couple more they want to just throw in here, we'd be glad to take them. I think we're about good. Dr. Tram, Jasmine, are you there? Do you want to bring up our last couple slides that we have? And Dr. Tram, if you wouldn't mind, we'll just keep the question log open here in case anybody pops any questions in. So just what we started with, before Dr. Tram gave us his presentation, just where you can find us after this webinar, and that's at the 16th. For another webinar. Registration link is in the chat. If you want to click on that and register right now, would be a great idea. Next slide is right at Chicago Midwinter and at Lab Day, both booths right there. Come see this in person. You're really going to have to find us though, because unlike a lot of other printers, they're not that big. It's very small. So you're really going to have to squint your eyes and look and say, oh, there's the printer. I see it now. And you'll see how it'll fit in your operatory. Booth 1638 at Chicago Midwinter and booth Q9 at Lab Day. Next slide. And then gradual digital integration into analog removable prosthetic workflow and a CE credit provided as well. That will be in person at Lab Day. And then our last speaking event at Lab Day is with 𝗲𝗁, CDT and CEO of Sculpture Studios. Is milling obsolete? And we shared that answer with you on the last webinar, but boy, printing definitely has a fit in dentistry right now, and a very affordable fit, and a streamlined fit as well, as Dr. Tram showed us earlier. And then the last slide is, hey, here's what the winter special is, just so everybody is aware of, where we fit right in the operatory, where we fit with your workflow, but hey, more importantly, right, where we fit in your budget as well. Right, we all know, right, everything sounds wonderful, and we all love this new technology, and we want to embrace it and bring it into our practice. But right, it has to be affordable. So you see the promotional price there of $89.89, and what's included, it's really completely a turnkey system here. There's nothing else needed. Available through multiple channel partner resellers, Atlanta Dental, Burkhart Dental, Cadre, and now Henry Schein Dental as well. So available through those 4 major resellers. And then one more slide. And that is right, we all promised you something at the end of the presentation. So we have our Alpha AI software, which is included in that $89.89. There's no extra cost in that $89.89 except sales tax and freight. But we also have what we call as Alpha AI Premium, save you a couple clicks. You do not have to have premium. But it's a subscription base. It's $20 a month. But we're offering anybody that wants to try Alpha AI Premium to go to our website, Ackuretta.com, enter the code in for Tram Alpha, and that's going to be your special code to get the first month free. Again, you don't have to purchase Alpha AI Premium to run our software. Our Alpha AI standard software is incredible. And has been used for the last year and a half. But the Alpha AI Premium, for some practices that might want to delegate some of their 3D printing to an assistant, this makes it a little easier for him or her, and a few less clicks. And if you're a high volume practice, you might want to consider this for just $20 a month. And I think we are at the end, Jasmine. Is that correct? I just want to check and see if there's any more questions that come up here. Dr. Tram, that was an incredible, very informative webinar. We appreciate your time today. Any last words you want to leave the group with?
This is so cool, man. Like, you just got to get started. Like, the idea is that, I mean, I know it was a quick run through today, but it is, to me, this is the future. 3D printing, the ability to have a small form factor, print restorations literally anywhere in the world. Like, that is so cool. And the fit is amazing. Like, so all these things, it's gonna mean there is a need, there is a want, this to me is so cool. And that's why I'm so excited for it, is that it's gonna be such a huge value addition to your practice because of what you can do with something like this. I mean, like I said, we just barely touch the subject of restorations. We haven't talked about dentures yet, Maryland bridges, stay plates, partials. Like there's so many other applications, wax ups, mock ups. There's so many other applications that this, having a 3D printer can do, that it'll open up your eyes to what's possible in terms of what you can do, what you can take care of in the office. And so for me, this is it's revolutionary.
Awesome. Thank you. And then, of course, which I don't think we've spoken up, I didn't speak about, and that is, you mentioned, rodent sculpture, you mentioned 𝗍𝗿, right? But we're open to 160 plus different resins. So while, you're contemplating bringing this into your practice, now is the time to do it. The resin companies are out there dumping millions and millions of dollars into R&D to come up with the next resin that you could pour into a 3D printer and print the future, right? But so much of it you can do right now. So just keep that in mind also when we talk about how do you compare against different printing companies, different printers, and that is the openness of this printer and 160 plus different resins, including the Ackuretta brand, right? We do have our own 𝗗𝗲 brand as well, but we have so many great name brand partners that truly are partners with us, and we validate their workflows and they validate our printer. So what you're printing today is wonderful. What you're going to be able to print tomorrow and next week and in the very near future, right? We can't even talk about it now because it's so exciting, but we all know what's going to happen as these resin companies continue to pump out R&D and to come up with these different types of resins that will all go in the mouth. With that said, everybody, it was wonderful seeing everybody today. And Dr. Tram, thank you so much for your time today. Enjoy California, enjoy the warm weather, and remember everybody to see us at Chicago Midwinter or Lab Day at the end of the month. Thanks, everybody.